I'll be right. I'll be right.
Alright.
Oh, I gotta hit this thing. Get notified by Mary. Oh, wait a second. I gotta fix something here.
We are.
Yep, we are. We are. Just gotta fix.
Okay. So we're here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I hate that you have to go to all messages on this thing. That's the only thing is the comments are kind of, but no platform is perfect.
Well, nope, it's okay. I like it though. I like it. Don't know why you're complaining. I like it. It's fine.
Good morning,
Fix a
Barbara.
stupid screen. We are on.
Yeah.
I didn't even get a message that time. I'm mad. Yeah, it's gonna be a rainy, crappy day here in God's country here in New England. So we'll see how that goes.
Only for one day.
People jump on, hopefully. We'll see what
Yeah,
happens.
Barbara's on here. She said good morning.
Oh, hello, Barbara. How are you? I still think about Barbara a lot when she talks about the fact what books don't we like, because that was a brilliant question.
It was really good.
Never heard that before. That's
really
I see
good
her.
question.
I think about that from time to time. So it's just
Good
one
morning.
of those things.
Good morning, Ski. Good morning, Ben.
Hey, gentlemen, happy Saturday morning. Hopefully the weather's a little better where you're at. It's pouring piss rain here. It's going to be crappy all weekend, I think.
Fine. God, it's fine.
They call liquid sunshine, Mary, in the Chamber of Commerce. That's what they call it. But we're going to be getting a lot of liquid sunshine today. So that's what we're doing. So I got to wake up a little bit, get the machine going. Fun night last night, staying in. We recorded last night on a Friday night.
Yep.
Making me work on a Friday. You know, the CEO of the Breakfast Club podcast wanted to do a Friday night recording. So I do as I'm told, apparently.
Barbara said she's glad you liked it. Yeah, it was a great.
No, it was cool.
Like,
it's a great thing.
Like,
it was,
I mean, I'm like, but yeah, it kind of stumped me. Like I said, there's books that I like, but I don't always like the point of view in them, but they're still worth it to read. But then there's books that I'm just like, don't read that.
Well, that's the thing is there's so many, God knows how many books I've read in this subject, but it's good though. But I'm like movies. I like almost everything. I like what I read. I can usually find positive in something, but there's only been a few books I've read that I just really I can only think of a couple times I've stopped reading and put the book away because I just can't muscle it down anymore. It's right. It doesn't happen all that often.
No, same. No, and I'm reading, it takes me a long time to read a book because whatever. I've always been a slow reader, but I'm reading the Beauregard biography by Williams, and it's very, very good. I'm to the part now where Gettysburg has happened, and he's trying to figure out, kind of where he is and all that. And he's like writing people saying like, well, they've chained me to a desk. I can't do anything. Like, if I was offered such and such, I would do it, but they won't do anything with me. Like he was like, Beauregard was like a caged animal, I
mean, there was a lot of that. I mean, when we were talking specifically last night about Elijah Kellogg and Peter Porter from the 8th New York and 2nd Connecticut Heavy Artilleries, that's all they wanted. And you think about Robert Gould Shaw in the 54th, he wants to take his men out to fight. And that was the big thing was a lot of them, the war was passing them by and they wanted to get out there and fight. We talked a lot. If you've studied Cold Harbor, you know how important those reserves were, those heavy artilleries that were called into action from the forts who had never seen it in action before. And for whatever reason, Meade put them right at the point of the spear against Lee, and they got slaughtered. And it's Cold Harbor is a real thing. If you study that, I mean, it's pure bloodshed. The numbers are a little bit embellished. Ken Burns talked about 7,000 fell in the first 15 minutes. That's not true. I mean, only 4,000 fell in the entire day, and that's June 3rd. Yeah. But it was pretty bad. It was so bad that even Lee didn't even know how good it was. Neither Meade, Grant, nor Lee was even on the field when the battles were taking place on June 1st and June 3rd.
That's because like Grant and Meade didn't come up with a plan. Like they were like, we're going to attack, but then they were like, let's let the corps commanders decide. And it's like, and then they were like, I guess we're all attacking at the same time. And, at the end of it, like Baldy Smith was the one that was like, I'm not doing this, dude. Like, we're done. Like, this is, even
Yeah.
Hancock kind of was like, nah, I don't think so. Now Horatio Wright, he kind of half-assed fired a few more shots, but he was like, yeah, I think I'm done,
Well, they were kind of pinned down, and that was,
Yeah.
we said before, that was the real beginning of siege warfare, modern war. And if you see how it started versus how it ended, the American Civil War, it's fascinating.
You
How
almost need to recognize it at the end. Oh, Lisa, Miranda, Jim, David, good morning.
Oh, hey, Jim, the truth Samia,
Yeah.
as I live and breathe, the man, the legend, of course,
So
the great
jealous he
Mrs.
got
Samia.
that grapefruit beer from Greater Good. He said he went there and they have new grapefruit IPA. And I'm like,
Oh, that place we had a good day with them that day.
That was
We got
fun.
we got to we got to do that again,
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Samia. We need another froth up.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I think
But,
that'd be great if we did that.
I think and we talked about it last night, like this is like the beginning of the war is very much that Jomini, the Napoleon style warfare. And I talked a little bit in the episode about how, there was some, like they'd all went to West Point. Well, most of them. I mean, you have ones like Pat Claiborne that didn't, John Brown Gordon doesn't go to West Point and all that. So they don't have that idea of how warfare is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Grant does. Grant's had the same education as Beauregard, yet their attitudes towards war are completely different. Beauregard, now we didn't get to see how he's going to do because he's basically chained to a desk, but you see Grant's evolution of getting away and I think what aided Grant in that is being out in the Western theater, and the terrain is different. Vicksburg forced him to change the warfare style, I think. So he had that firsthand experience. And, you're someone like Beauregard who can't get out of the textbook. He's appalled in the Mexican War when Winfield Scott is like, we're not going to do this by the book. We're going to do something different. He's like, how can you do that? That's not what we learned. They really have to, these men that are educated at West Point really have to basically write a whole new style of warfare. And you see this, like the entrenchments happening in both theaters, but what happens more so in the Eastern theater is the trench warfare that you see in World War I. It's modern warfare, as you said, beginning.
Well, these guys, these West Pointers, these officers, I mean, they were all trained by Dennis Mahan. They looked at him, as a god in West Point. Yeah. And so what he said was gospel, and he got a lot of his stuff, the Jomini, that type of thing. And even von Steuben, go back to the Revolutionary War, it's the tactics hadn't really changed, but the weaponry did. Yeah. And that's where they missed the boat. And the wise ones changed with the fly. They realized that we have to do something different. And really, I mean, the trench warfare was going on off and on here and there. Mm-hmm. I mean, don't forget too, with George Sears Green, when he was building his breastworks at Gettysburg, they would John Geary was basically laughing at him, saying, "You're wasting your time."
Well, it's because it's not in the book, it's not in the textbook, and it's like anybody, like sometimes you have to get away from what is written down and try something new, and that's how the great ones stood at the end. Was they were the ones that recognized warfare has to change. War of attrition, we talked about that. Grant is doing like a war of attrition, and it's not necessarily food; it's also men on Lee's
right, because that would be the war of nutrition.
So bad.
I mean, sometimes it's just so easy. It's just so easy sometimes.
But then Sherman is not really doing a war of attrition with Johnston in the Atlanta campaign, but Johnson is a very different opponent than Lee. And Sherman's a very different general than Grant. So you're going to have a different style being fought out there. But March to the Sea, that's his version of attrition.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about it though, is you can see how it is. You've got almost a 2-to-1 manpower advantage right before the Battle of the Wilderness. So you're talking about May 7th, May 8th, 1864, right around there. You're just going to keep swinging and swinging. It's like two hockey fighters just going until one of them falls down. And you're stronger. You're going to take a beating, but you think you can hit him that one extra time. And it did work. It ultimately did work.
Yeah.
But Grant was losing 2,000 men per day during the Overland campaign, because that was nonstop fighting. I mean, you think of the big boys like the Wilderness and Spotsylvania and even North Anna and obviously Cold Harbor, but there was skirmishing all along that was never ending, not to mention desertions, not to mention illness, right? The Rosewoods clown probably killed hundreds, but you have people who are just, you're just hemorrhaging men.
Mhm.
And the benefit Grant had, of course, is that he could go to that bullpen and pull those heavy artillerists out of the force. Lee couldn't. Like we said in the episode, you just can't go to the soldier store and order 5,000 soldiers from behind the glass.
No, they're
I mean,
losing men, and that's too. I think, isn't this around the time that Claiborne drops his emancipation? Isn't that in
I thought it
64?
was a little before that.
Around
You
this
got me on
time
that one.
and he's dropping it as they're, I think he's probably reading the numbers, not just in Army of Tennessee, but also he's obviously finding out what's going on with Lee. And he's seeing like, shit, we're losing men. And I guess he does the math behind it. And he's like, we're not going to be able to win that. Like, there's no way. We don't have the manpower to do it. So even Claiborne he's seeing that. And as we all know, what happened at the end is Davis, says, okay, we'll arm, we'll arm the African Americans.
Well, so Lee is pulling as many men as he possibly can to help fight Grant. And that, you mentioned the simultaneous stuff of the March of the Sea. It's why you have the old men and the young boys defending Sherman in Georgia. Why you don't have much of a resistance, because they didn't have the men, they didn't have the people. And so that you can see why the attrition thing was going to work. It just was.
Yeah.
I mean, Grant gets, called the butcher and all that stuff for it.
That's thanks to Mary Lincoln. She referred to him as that around some media that were at the White House, and the media just ran with it. Oh, and Frank answered our question. Claiborne had his proposal on January the 2nd, 1864.
Yeah, I knew it was a little bit before that, but you had a situation where Lee was kind of counting on the fact, because Lee did figure out eventually. He figured out, okay, this guy is just going to keep coming and coming.
Yeah.
That's like the Terminator. He's just not going to stop until he's dead,
Yeah.
But he did realize that if it got really bloody and really screwed up, that the Copperheads and other people, their appetite for it maybe wasn't going to last. And they were going to say, this is ridiculous. We have to stop this. But again, this was the grand finale. This Cold Harbor was Lee's last big hurrah as far as any kind of victory. And they say victory, he still lost 5,200 men.
Yep. I mean, I knew that going into it, but when I read that again, I was like, the war's got less than a year to go, and this is his last victory. And it becomes this kind of, the siege and stuff. And Richmond is no longer the target. And you think about it, they're only 10 miles from Richmond at this point, but it's Lee. And it's just like, I think Sherman's target was Atlanta, but it was also the decimation of Army of Tennessee.
Well, it was the logistics. It was destroying the railroad hub of Atlanta, because like we said before, you can make all the bullets you want. If you can't deliver them, it's pointless. So if you're going to take out that commercial hub in Atlanta and Richmond, I mean, what they wanted was that they wanted the train, all the railroad connections in Richmond. Lee thought that it would still capture the flag. And he never really figured that out. But like we were saying this morning, a little while ago, was, Lee should have realized when he evacuated Richmond and he started going on his Appomattox run, Grant didn't go to Richmond and hang out. He went after him. So at that point, if it didn't realize by then that he was the target, then he never would have. But he always felt, and this is where Grant was really smart. He said, well, if he thinks that we're coming for Richmond, he's going to have to come out and fight us at some point. There's going to be a big battle outside of Richmond somewhere. And Grant maneuvered. That's why he wanted the Cold Harbor crossroads, because it allowed him to funnel all his men in.
Yeah.
And if you're going to, and that's why he wanted the Spotsylvania crossroads, because he wanted the road network.
Yeah.
Because he knew that if he captured those road networks, then Lee was going to have to come out and fight him, because he had a clear shot to Richmond. And so if you're talking about, and Lee for many times had been the mastermind with these battles, Chancellorsville, things like that. But this is the one time really where Grant really beat him, because he never understood his motivation until it was too late. And then once
Grant
Richmond
had evolved Grant was such a different general than McClellan, Burnside especially, and even Meade, although I do rank Meade up with being one of the greatest generals of the Civil War. He's just very different from Grant.
Oh no, he absolutely.
Neither Grant or Meade have a good day at Cold Harbor at all, for whatever reason.
Especially Meade.
He kind of phones it in. He's like, well, whatever,
Meade didn't read the room, and the fact of the matter is, after that initial attack, he should have learned. And then, but again, what screws it? We said before, communication, weather, terrain, the big three that dick you every battle.
Mhm.
And the weather hit them again, except it's the heat. So you have that July, you have that June 1st battle where the guys from that second Connecticut go in. Those guys go in, they get beat, and the attack's supposed to start again on the 2nd.
Yeah.
And because it's too hot and Hancock's men can't get there in time and they're exhausted and their horses are literally dying on the road trying to get to the left of Horatio Wright, he's going to wait till June 3rd. And that extra day allows Lee to really dig in and really, really strengthen those breastworks. And if you've been to Cold Harbor, you've seen them, you see how impressive they are. And that was really it. So you're attacking almost like a D-Day situation. You're attacking these pillboxes across open field. And it's just a brutal battle. It just really, really is. And we focus on a couple of different regiments when we did the episode the other day, but we could have done 2 or 3 or 4 episodes.
This could have been a 2-parter because it's actually as short of a battle as it is. It's very complex too.
But it would have been the same story over and over and over again.
Just brutality over and over.
You could talk about Barlow's guys. He had a little bit of success fighting Cadmus Wilcox, but not really. Yeah. He's going to get pushed back. Nelson Miles, Michigan, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, those guys. But again, the story repeats itself over and over and over again. Baldy Smith, his 18th Corps, smashed. Obviously, Wright's 6th Corps, who got smashed at Spotsylvania, is going to get smashed again here at Cold Harbor. Yep. So that war of attrition is working, but you're losing men by the
it's that energy of your men, and it's at like the cost of the men. Miranda mentions that her second great-grandfather's, 2 times great-grandfather's reward for winning Newmark was being sent to Cold Harbor to back up, and that's where he was taken as a POW. And then Frank mentions that Cold Harbor is an interesting battlefield to visit, but it's neither cold nor a harbor.
Well, we talked about that of why you expected, to think it's some kind of naval battle. We said before, it was a tavern, a crossroads. There was a tavern there called Cold Harbor. And it was because it was a safe harbor for travelers. Yeah. And the word cold told the travelers that there was no hot food. So Cold Harbor meant it was a hotel that didn't have food. Yeah. That's how like Cashtown in Gettysburg or over in Cashtown. So it's the same type of thing. But the problem with Cold Harbor is that the primary battlefield, it's built over for the most part. Most of the real fighting, if you want to talk about Barlow and you want to talk about Birney and you want to talk Gibbon and you want the 2nd Corps, it's just pretty much on or south of the old Gaines Mill battlefield. And which Gaines Mill is pristine.
That's such a cool place to visit.
And it's in pissing distance of Cold Harbor. If you take the right out of the parking lot, you get to an intersection, you bear left, it's right there. That's where a lot of the fighting went. And the Battle of Gaines Mill took place during the 7 days, a couple of years before. And there are soldiers, from the 8th New York Heavy Artillery who talk about as they're charging, they're tripping over skulls and bones from Gaines Mill.
Yeah.
This is like a horror movie. I mean, they're fighting and they're running across the field. They're literally stepping on skulls and falling as they're going across the field. I mean, that's a real deal thing right there. That really, and just put yourself in the shoes of these poor soldiers, especially these 8th New York Heavy Artillery guys, these paper collar guys that they were called. They never seen it before. And this was their introduction to the Civil War warfare, was stepping over skulls, charging an enforced position, and then getting cut down and mowed down.
Yeah.
Sucks,
Terrific. Good morning, MJ. MJ's our friend MJ.
Hello, MJ. Had some fun with her this morning.
Yeah. We're going to be seeing her in 2 weeks from today. We will be in Gettysburg. And I believe she is at Unity Park. She will be portraying Pauline Cushman with the living history group that she's part of. So that's pretty cool. Lots of fun stuff happening that weekend. Just a reminder, anybody that's going to be in Gettysburg for the anniversary, there's lots going on. Saturday, July 1st at 4:30, we will be doing our free event at the Spangler Farm. We partnered with Gettysburg Foundation. So our friend Mark, who is part of the foundation, has very generously, he's donating his time to give everybody a tour, and he does a fantastic tour out at Spangler Farm as well.
He knows I'm going to give beer at Foursquare later. That's
and that's the other thing. So 7:00 on Saturday, July 1st, we will be going to Foursquare. If anybody wants to join us there, welcome to come out and talk Civil War. Have some beer.
And you know what, Mary? You can drink beer. You won't be judged.
Exactly.
Perfect. It's a great thing. It's a great
thing.
It's a great thing. It really is. So that'll be fun. So yeah, that's what's cool. That if you haven't been out to, have you not been out to Spangler Farm at the 11th Corps Field Hospital? Definitely do it. It's one of those rare opportunities. They close at 3:00, but they're going to open the doors for us at 4:30 for a private tour. It's totally free. It's not going to cost you anything.
If you want to make a donation to the Gettysburg Foundation, that would be awesome. But
exactly.
we're not making any money off of it. Like,
and we don't take money, and we won't take money ever. Right. But, certainly come out and you'll get the real tour. You'll go in the barn. You get to see where Low Armistead, where he passed away. They
have the Rosecrans ambulance there. When we were there before, with I think we were there with the Samias. We were there. Gentili was there too, and I remember there was a few of us standing outside of the barn underneath, and we realized we were standing where the amputations had taken place.
Yeah,
and it was this whole, like, I'm like, oh God, this is so.
Mark will show you. He'll show you where the cemetery was, where people like George Nixon were initially buried. Yeah. He'll show you, he'll point out to the area where all the amputations, the bones, everything was thrown out there. Yeah. There's artillery out there. And you know what? And it's pristine. And you're looking at the vista that they would have seen. It's virtually unchanged. And so it's one of those places you go. It's part of the battlefield. It's just off of Tawnytown Road. Yeah. It's by But definitely, if you can make it, if you can't, we're gonna do a live from there. We'll record it. But if you can get out there and do it, because it's a rare opportunity to kind of see it in a private setting, and Mark will show you some places that are pretty cool. So definitely do it. Hopefully people come out. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, I know. I'm really.
And again,
to
specify again, it's totally free.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost anything.
You want to donate to the Gettysburg Foundation, please.
Because if you book a regular tour, the visitor center is going to cost you money to go. So we got a free deal. So definitely do it. So that's cool.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to that. And again, event at Foursquare, 7:00 afterwards, if anybody wants to join us for that.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah. And that Foursquare obviously is great. They're very good to us, and we have a good time with that. So definitely check it out. And there's a lot of stuff going on. We'll talk real quick since we can think about Gettysburg. Lisa Samia's got her book signing going on at the Heritage, as us classy people like to say. In that she has that. So check out her social media. You can go meet her and you can get a book. MJ has got her living history at Unity Park. You mentioned that. Yep. We got that.
Not to mention giving her presentation at 2:30 at Unity Park.
She'll have her, MJ, throw in the comments because we might be wrong with the time. But on the 30th of June, American Battlefield Trust with Gary is doing an event at the Lee headquarters. So if you have kids, it's more kids geared to talk about that. That's free to check out. You just got to register. There's the event at the Daniel Lady Farm. There's all kinds of stuff going on. So if you come into Gettysburg that weekend, and I realize Vicksburg's going on too, but we're talking Gettysburg. So blah, blah,
it's the 1/6. I mean, it's the 1/6.
I know. But what we're saying is, if you, there's a lot of stuff to do. A lot of our Ranger friends will be doing their tours. Of our Battle Guide friends will be doing their stuff. Take advantage of the stuff, because if you've not been to a reunion, especially a big one like the 150th, 160th, one of the ones, the town really goes over the top, and you really.
This is our first time going to an anniversary.
Right. So you get basically brought back in time, and you get to talk to a lot of cool people at the restaurants, the bars, the battlefields, all like-minded people who share that same passion, that sickness that we all have. And it's going to be a great time. Bring your tick spray, bring your bug spray, bring your morning after aspirin, Mary, especially with you. Yeah, no good. But it'll be a good time. So we'll be out and about. So if you're around, if you can't make it, just shoot us a message. Maybe we'll be around. We could love to meet as many people as we can. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we'll be in town. And so MJ said 2 p.m. on Saturday, July 1st, Cushman at Unity Park. Her event is completely free. Gentili is calling us out for ignoring the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Aldie.
Wow, that was the next one I was going to talk about. Gentili must be one of those Australian battles, but that's good. So we'll definitely go see. I'm going to go see MJ. I have a big defense sign. I'll hold it up.
Yeah.
There's a lot. This is a big year for anniversaries. Obviously, all the 1863
we did an episode
battles.
About Aldie last year.
We did do an episode about Aldie, John Gentili. You probably didn't even listen to it. Anyway, but there's a lot. This is a good year. This year, in the next year, really the next year and a half, you've got a lot of the stuff coming for the 160th. And Ski's on here, and he was talking to us about the 160th of Fredericksburg that took place last December. But this is different because it's warmer weather. You can get out, you can see more stuff. So
I'm curious as to what they're going to do for the 160th for like Chattanooga and Chickamauga and all that. Like they usually do really good live streams. What's his face? I can't remember the Ranger's name at Chickamauga, but he's really good at he does all the live streams for them. Anyway, they'll probably be doing that around the anniversary in September, and then again in November for Chattanooga for those battles. And I mean, those battles, though, Chattanooga is a lot like, you can't really get to them, or you can't see what was seen there because it's all residential stuff now, like the monument to, who was it, the 137th PA?
Who's talking about now?
Chattanooga, the same monument at Gettysburg, is also in Chattanooga, the exact same monument.
Yeah, that was over Missionary Ridge.
Yeah, that's what I mean. The battles for Chattanooga.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those. Tough. It's a tough neighborhood right there. So you kind of want to drive by and go slow.
Frank says this is going to be his first time for a major Civil War reunion. Really want to see a reenactment. And Gentili said, was a good episode on Aldi, even if you ignored my boy, Medal of Honor.
Oh, John Gentili, he is full of shit. We've talked about Luigi Santola. You speak with forked tongue, Gentili. You need to go take a time out and sit in the corner right there for that one. We didn't talk a lot about it. We did mention him though, but it's pretty funny. But no, that's a good one. But it's definitely the time to go out there and check out some of these places. And I'm dying to get back down there again. We haven't been down there since February. So it's been too long. It's too long. I've got the pangs.
Jeez, I went like 3 years without going there.
My fault. Freaking fault. It's your problem, But no, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. Hopefully, people come down, and it's going to be a great year. It's going to be a great year for a lot of these things, and so we're looking forward to it. But certainly, Cold Harbor's 160th Mary's. I try to get back on topic here. It's a waste of time. I'll try.
It's going to matter. Actually, MJ had a good one. Civil War community has some great people in it who believe history is the star of the show and support one another. Exactly. The Civil War history community is a great community. Welcoming. I've met some of my closest friends in this community. Obviously, I met you through it, which is awesome. But it's a great community where you can go to Gettysburg, you get together, and you can talk about the battle. And, no one's right, no one's wrong, whatever. Yes, there are the people that are kind of D-bags, but whatever. But for the most part, like this group.
But enough about Gentili. But we'll talk more.
No, I was just gonna say, this group, this group here is really awesome because we're gonna talk about it.
Well, I was talking to somebody at work, my real life apparently, the one that pays the bills, and my office is filled with Civil War stuff. I probably got the best Civil War museum in all of Cape Cod in this office I have. And someone says, what is it about you Civil War people where you're all kind of crazy? And I said, something? I go, it's unique to the Civil War because if you're into it, you're really into it, it just gets in your blood and just never lets you go. And I truly feel it's because we're all called to tell their stories. And some people resonate with specific people, specific regiments, specific battlefields. But it's one of those things you get it or you don't. It's like Lionel Richie, you either like him or you hate him. It's one or the other, right? But that's the truth, though. And I'm trying to explain. I go, if you don't feel that way, then you just don't get it. But if you get it, it consumes you, and you study, and it becomes an important part of your life, and it never lets you go. And that's what makes Civil War people special. It really, really does.
Yeah. And Gentili just commented number of events, and Gettysburg looks incredible. Great people in this world. Yeah, like the community is really good. It's like, and you find your battle, and you usually find a person that you gravitate towards, and you study, and you become kind of.
I wonder who yours is.
Howard, Sarah Edmonds, Claiborne. I'm very, and honestly, I'm shocked it's taken me as long as it has to read the Beauregard biography, because Beauregard was kind of the first general who, when I got into the Civil War and I was like 6 or 7, that was the first one I remember hearing his name.
Well, Beauregard, I used to know a guy who was related to him, friend
Yeah, you were
Sean
telling me that.
Beauregard. Yeah,
He was like his
years
great
ago.
great grandson, great great great
Yeah, it
grandson.
was. Yeah, he's his, and so he was. He goes, oh my. This is probably God or 2000s. He's early 2000s. He's like, yeah, I'm related to a Civil War general. And I said, and I go, what's your last name? I remember he goes, Beauregard. I go, fuck, really? Pierre Gustave Toutal Beauregard? Yeah, that's him. I go, you're related to Beauregard? Yeah, he's my great grandfather. I'm like, holy crap! And he's from here. He's from Framingham, Mass.
Didn't you say he kind of looked like him?
A little bit. He had that European Frenchy little look to him. So who knows? Maybe, but he's like, yeah. I go, do you study him? He's like, no. I got a friend here who's a direct descendant of Charles Russell Lowell. She couldn't give a shit less. I explained to her Josephine Shaw, Robert Gould Shaw. You're like royalty, and she's like, eh. So again, you either get it or you don't, and that's what's cool about it. It's a big group, but it's a specific group. It's a very esoteric group. And I said before, and I'll say it again: the Civil War people are the smartest people I know because they're the most worldly people, and that's just not being hyperbole. That just is. That's just my personal experience. Nothing better than
have fun debates too. Like, I mean, we have a few debates with people where you'll see the first corps broke first and I'll come like 11th corps, and you have this fun debate, and it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
The funny part is when we're talking about Gettysburg, the two best debates you're going to have at the Reliant Mine at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. And this is consistent. It's different people. It's always the same two. Who broke first or 11th, and where James Smith's guns were on Devil's Den.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised at the number of debate those questions bring. And it's just a lot of fun. And the mine is the best place to finish your night because everyone's kind of floating a little bit at that point. Some people actually
usually there.
Some people like me actually make it that far. Some people don't drop off, like some people I know.
Oh my God.
But you get to talk about a lot of this. And so I'm definitely looking forward to it, obviously, to get to meet a lot of cool people. We met a lot of people. We haven't met everybody, obviously, who follow this. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. That'll be a lot of fun.
I was going to say, like, I did that post last week about how we're coming to the Gettysburg campaign season. It's the season where I have to listen to like Howard sucked at Gettysburg, blah, blah, blah. And I have to remind people he wasn't in charge of the 11th Corps on July the 1st. It was Carl Stern. But then Hessler chimed in. He had that comment, Jim Hessler from Battle Gettysburg podcast. He had that great comment where he was like relating because he was like, yeah, Sickles, how dare he, salients are bad. And then he's like, yawn. And then I just said, we need a support group.
Well, that's the thing too, is the misconceptions. And that's cool because you can tell the people who read the headlines versus the people who read the whole story sometimes. And that's what's cool about it, is just talking and having the conversations.
Yeah.
But that'll be that's going to be a good time. All these things are, and definitely go out. And like I would say to everybody, if you're extroverted at all and you're at any battlefield, just start talking to people because you'll be surprised the level of knowledge you will pick up. Just sitting at the bar at the Patty O'Rourke's or sitting at the bar, at any of these places, because they're all like-minded people, and you can learn so much. Now, it may not be right, but you get a good feel of the mentality where people come from, right?
Yeah, and yes, there are the people that are like, I'm right, you're wrong, and they like to be gatekeepers and all that. Like, I mean, I said the other day, and we're both part of some Western theater group, and the question was, what is the battle that is most misunderstood in the Western theater? And I said, Shiloh. Like, nobody understands that the Union was caught off guard. And I had a couple of people respond to me and say, like, no, that's been debunked, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Sherman was...
Well, allegedly, Western Tim Smith debunked it, but I'm not sure how true that totally is, though, because you have that experience where Sherman and those Ohio guys, they were surprised, and they went fleeing. They ran the Howard 10K, back to Pittsburgh
before
Landing.
Howard was a thing,
right? And so I think people get a little oversensitive about it, and certainly that 2-day delay because of the weather really hurt Beauregard and Albert Sidney Johnson.
Yeah.
But obviously the arrival of the Army of the Ohio from Don Carlos Buell, that really helped. Yeah, you had your situation. Lew Wallace got lost, and there's all that stuff.
Yeah, but that's not really as bad. That's like, is that really his fault? Like, I mean,
No, because
he had like 3 or 4 different orders, and he's like, what am I supposed to do?
Grant didn't send out a real guide. He sent a quartermaster who didn't know where the hell he was going. Of course he's going to get lost, but he does get blamed. And, there's a lot of, if you're reading a lot of, if you're a fan of Longstreet, or you're a fan specifically, you're going to be forced to defend a lot of stuff, because there was a lot of pro-Lee stuff that came out after the war, and that really Longstreet was the whipping boy for a lot of different reasons. And so you have to be able to distinguish the truth from the non-truths and the propaganda. It's funny because MJ's on here, so it's going to be thinking about Hancock. Hancock Armistead, they have that bromance in the book and the movie, which really wasn't true. If they really wanted to be accurate, they would have done Longstreet and Grant for the bromance, because that was a real one. They went to West Point together. Longstreet was class of 42. Grant was class of 43. But they were pals in school. They fought Mexico together. And he ended up, after the war, gravitating towards him and campaigning for Grant for president. Mm-hmm. In Longstreet, he lost the South because after the war ended, he was very much into franchising the blacks, giving them the vote in the South, which was unheard of. And so he was hated by everybody. He was hated by the North because he was a Confederate. Yeah. He was hated by the South because he was blamed for screwing Lee. And now he wants to give the blacks the vote. I mean, he's pissing off so many people. I'm surprised he's not moving to Canada. That's how bad he's doing. But that's what he's doing. So, but Longstreet was a lightning rod. And there's a lot of people like that as you study the individuals. Hancock, if you want to stay with Hancock, put the he thing together. It was like old school, a movie, the bromances back in Mexico. But if you had a Grant Longstreet type of movie together, a book, I mean, if you look at, Chapultepec, all the stuff they went through in Mexico and how much Longstreet adored U.S. Grant. He adored the hell out of him. That was the
man at his wedding.
That was the real bromance in the Civil War.
Yeah.
If you really want to pick one.
There's a lot of friendships and bromances that we don't realize, I think. I mean, the one everybody talks about is Grant and Sherman, but what nobody talks about is the fact that they had a huge falling out because Grant was a dick to Sherman, and Sherman was like, fuck you, man. Like, I'm not gonna. And what Grant did is he did a favor for Rawlins, because Rawlins, this is sad, he's dying of tuberculosis. But I mean, I'm not a huge Rawlins fan. He's such a freaking mother hen. And he's
Henry Rollins?
John Rollins. The ball club.
Anyway.
Whatever. Anyway, but there's a lot of friendships that we don't realize that really affected the Civil War. Williams talks about it in the Beauregard biography, the fact that Johnston and Beauregard worked very well together. Mm-hmm. Davis hated it because Johnston was the superior and he would treat Beauregard like he was in charge. And Davis didn't like that. But Johnston was kind of the more passive, and Beauregard would come up with the plans and the ideas. I mean, he's the one that had the idea. He went to Davis and was like, we need to invade Maryland now. And Davis is like, no, we don't. And then Lee does it like a year later.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, the times do change. The exigencies of battle of the war do change. Lee certainly, when it's ironic that that the Battle of Cold Harbor began really on the 1st of June, which is the 2-year anniversary when he took command.
When Howard lost his arm.
And when Howard lost his arm, that's right.
And when
no question about that.
When Joseph E. Johnston was wounded, and that wounding, I don't think we realize how much that changes the Civil War.
Well, I mean, think about it. Whoever shot Joseph E. Johnston was maybe the most fortuitous shot ever fired in the Civil War. It really was.
Not Albert Sidney Johnson getting killed, but Joseph E. Johnston.
I mean, I like me some Joseph E. Johnston.
Anybody
whose middle name is Eggleston is cool with me, by the way. But he was somebody who I like him. He was there at the beginning all the way to the end. But Lee was the right guy at the right time. We talk a lot about Hood being the wrong guy at the wrong time. Lee was the right guy at the right time. Mm-hmm. And he did alienate a lot of people when he wanted to take his army into Maryland, because he had a lot of soldiers say, I didn't sign up for going in out of the state. I signed up to defend my home here. But he did it. He went into Maryland. His Maryland campaign, for the most part, was pretty strong. He did get pushed back by McClellan, and then he doubled down in Pennsylvania, and that was a little different because it was more of a supply thing at that point. But he was aggressive, and he did do it, and he won his men over too. Yeah. From the time, I mean, he was an advisor to Jeff Davis and really managed the coastal defenses and the defenses around Richmond at that point.
Yeah.
He was somebody who, he was an old guy who came in, and I think some people like Johnson, I think some people like some of the predecessors, but they didn't like the fact that he was taking them out of the state.
No.
Those tolls in Maryland are expensive too, Mary. So that's probably another reason why.
I like Joseph E. Johnson quite a bit. Albertson E. Johnson, I don't like as much as I used to, I guess, because I've read more and I'm kind of like, he's not as good as what they say he is. But getting back to the whole friendship thing, there's other friendships too, like Rosecrans and Thomas, that aren't thought of a lot, but that is a really good, it's not just a good working relationship, it's a good friendship. Gentili said, yeah, Darren has never judged anyone on beer choice.
Nope, never.
That was great.
I mean, that was a great day that day. I actually felt, I do have a cold black heart, Mary, but I felt a little bad about that because I saw the look in John's face and he just felt, it was bad. But you know what though? He ordered that Yuengling. He did the right thing and I'm proud of him for it. And he did it. So good for you, John. Good for you. You chose wisely.
But I think, Thomas and Rosecrans. And so that's why I think when Grant goes west and he essentially fires Rosecrans, Thomas is put in a very awkward position where it's like, well, it was my good friend who was leading this and now I'm here. And I think the thing is Rosecrans, I never thought this before, I just thought, no, Rosecrans treated Thomas pretty well. Considering he was a Virginian and clearly Lincoln has bias against him, especially Grant and Sherman as well. And I think
I don't know if Lincoln really did as much as Grant and
Sherman and Grant did, but Lincoln shut down that cover on Harper's Weekly.
Yeah, he did. I think that was part of it, though. I think
and referred to him as specifically as being a Virginian.
I think Lincoln really wanted to promote Grant at that point. And because I think Grant, he had those quotes, had like Grant, he likes to fight, all this stuff he did. He was the opposite of everything. Lincoln wanted a fighter.
But I don't think Grant factored into that decision for Harper's Weekly because all Lincoln said was let the Virginian wait. Like it was a very mean comment.
Maybe it's tough to say. Nobody will know what.
But I don't think Grant was. There was nothing Grant was doing at that time.
No, but I think Lincoln had an idea of who he wanted to insert. It might not have been Grant. It might have been anybody. It could have been Halleck for all we know. But I think he wanted the poster boy of his army to be a non-Virginian. He just didn't. I think that was probably more of it. And obviously we'll never know because old Abe ain't talking. Right?
No, but it's still kind of but that's what I'm saying is I think Thomas is put in this very awkward situation when Rosecrans leaves because Rosecrans, I don't think cared that he was a Virginian. I think Rosecrans trusted Thomas. And then there's these, two guys from Ohio coming in and Rosecrans, funny enough, from Ohio too, but and Thomas is from Virginia and Sherman and Grant don't treat him very well. They don't trust him. And it's like, Thomas made a choice. And I mean, his family disowns him. Sisters turn the pictures against the wall. They don't just take them down; they turn them to the wall.
That was a real thing that people never got over. I mean, we live in a country now where it's the United States of America. But if you read some of the old stuff back then, every state considered themselves their own country. They had their own state money in a lot of cases. So the idea of going against your specific state was like going against your own country. We have this mindset in this 21st century mindset and applying them to the 19th century. And it's unfair to yourself to do so because it's just not accurate.
Yeah. The states like your home. It's at the time, you look at somebody like Patrick Claiborne, immigrant to America, settles first in Ohio, gets called to Arkansas because this guy comes up to him and is like, hey, I got like a pharmacy in Arkansas and Helena, do you want to go jungle manage it for me? And he's like, sure. That is a decision that probably, had he stayed in Ohio, he probably would have fought for the North because maybe he would have found his, start to feel at home there, but he hadn't been there long enough to make that decision. So he moves to Helena, Arkansas, and he finds home. He joins the Freemasons. He gets involved in politics. He studies law. He's a pharmacist. He does all this stuff. And Cleburne finds home. And he said, I'm fighting for my home. So it's a very different, it's not this coat, it's like, it's different, as you said, back then.
It's just a different mentality. It just is. And people held their values very tough. We talked about, old Jeb Stuart with this, the animosity he had towards some of his family who stayed with the North. But there's a lot of that. But again, it's a different world now. It's a different mentality. And like any other aspect of history, applying today's values to yesterday's history, it's just a bad formula. It just doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Frank said so what happens if I wear my Thomas the Rock shirt around Gettysburg bars? He absolutely has to. I told him that. And Joe Denise is on here. Morning, Joe.
Joe Denise, the man, the legend. We'll be seeing him, I assume. Joe, you're going to be in Gettysburg in a couple of weeks, I assume, for the anniversary. We'll definitely be. I've emptied a few glasses with old JD in the past, so we'll be doing that again. So we'll have some fun with that. But it's good. There's a lot of that. And when you read a lot of the diaries, it sounds like some of those vile stuff, but that's just the way it is. You read Mary Chesaw's diary, just the stuff she talks about. It's just a different world.
Yeah.
But that's why you read, though. That's why you read, is because you want to read, because you want to put yourself back in that era. You want to put yourself in the shoes of the people who lived then, to get a good flavor and a good understanding of what society was and how they dealt with it. How could you possibly study the American Civil War without reading the diaries of the soldiers who lived it, to get their feelings of how they felt?
Yeah, and why they're fighting and all that. And the other thing too, that we recommend this movie all the time, but to get a northern perspective for people that weren't agreeing with the war, the movie Copperhead. Right. And it really gives you a good understanding. And that movie is so underrated. It's so good. And it shows this side in the North where Billy Campbell's got the lead role. He's the guy that played Lincoln in Killing Lincoln. And he was, he's kind of like, his attitude is, why should I give a shit what's happening elsewhere?
I tried to explain that to somebody recently. It wasn't a Civil War person. I was trying to explain that, yes, it was North versus South, but it wasn't cut and dry. There were Union counties in the South. There were Confederate counties in the North, and whoever the hell I was talking to didn't get that. And I was trying to explain the Copperhead phenomenon. I was trying to explain the Jones County phenomenon, and how you had counties in the South where the Confederates had to go around because it was Union, it was pro-Union. And there were specifically parts of Maine, which were very, not pro-Confederate, but anti-war. They wanted nothing to do with it. And it goes back to that states thing again, where we were talking about, where some fisherman from Portland, Maine, doesn't give a crap less about slavery in the South because it doesn't affect his life. So why am I sending my son to fight in Virginia for something? I mean, it's a very tunnel vision type of philosophy.
But you remember the times they lived in. They don't live in the times of cell phones.
But they're not living in an era where they're looking at the whole country in a big high level. Their country was Maine.
Yeah.
So it's like the people who don't understand why we're supporting Ukraine. Why, or more importantly, the people who didn't understand why we're sending troops to Vietnam. Right? 30 whatever years ago was. It's the same concept. That's how the Civil War was with some of these states. And Maine was a big state that supplied a lot of the fish to the South, that for the plantations that fed the slaves. So there was a lot of, they had an economic interest in the Confederacy in that situation. So it was not this blue in the top and red on the bottom. And it's so complicated and so much more into it politically than a blue North and a red South. It was more blue and red, sprinkled all through it,
all over the place.
And right here in Boston, there's a statue for Robert Gould Shaw. He was not an abolitionist by any stretch of the imagination. He wasn't. He was a real life, Spalding Smales from Caddyshack. He was a spoiled brat of a kid who got to travel around to European schools. His parents were very abolition. and they wanted him to command the 54th Mass, and they went to Governor Andrew to get him the commission. He didn't like managing black soldiers. He just didn't get it, because there was no equality in his mind back then. He was not Frederick Douglass or Lord Garrison or any of these people. So it's a different thing, and the more you read, the more you realize that it's so complicated. It really, really is.
I know the war is so, it's not just like it's so complicated, the reasons, and everybody, and that's why I hate it when I see this whole, they're all traitors. You know, it's like, you can't paint everybody with a broad brush, and we see that done even today. Everything being painted with a broad brush. You can't label people as being one way that are part of one group.
No, but a lot of that comes from Grant, though. He said there are two parties: there are patriots, and there are traitors. And so some people take that literally. But everyone fought for different reasons. And I mean, slavery is, I mean, despite what you read on Twitter, of course, that was the genesis of the entire Civil War. That had been bubbling for years.
Yeah.
Yes, there were obviously people who didn't give a fiddler's fuck about slavery, who fought in the South. And there are people here in the North, like Sherman, who could not stand the African-American race.
Sherman was so racist.
So it's not a moral litmus test where you were born. If you were born in the South, you were evil. Born in the North, you were an angel, or vice versa.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as that. There's no absolutes in the Civil War. There never will be. But as you study more about it, you realize that they're all individual stories that need to be told. That's what's great about it. It really is.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, Sherman being a racist, I mean, by our standards, definitely he was. But even after the Civil War, he couldn't get past it. Like, he was writing Howard when he was leading the Freedmen's Bureau and founding Howard University, and saying, "Why are you doing this? It's making, you know, kind of like, why are you doing this for them? Like, make us all look bad," kind of thing. And Howard was abolitionist at a time when it wasn't cool, you know, and he one day made his thoughts known at West Point and got the shit kicked out of him.
Yeah.
And who comes to visit him in the hospital there?
It was Robert E. Lee.
Robert E. Lee came to visit
Robert E.
Howard.
And then no, and look, in modern politics nowadays is being applied to 19th century values, and that's ridiculous. But it just is what it is. Anything like itself, anything is an individual choice. Everything is an individual belief, like it always is.
Yeah.
But I mean, you cannot take the point of absolute going on far of pure hypocrisy and just hold on to it like grim death. And you see a lot of it, and that's the reality. That's where you get in trouble, to be honest. You've got to be open-minded, and you better be open-minded, because how the hell can you study the Civil War and study one side?
You can't.
Never made sense to me.
You can't. I mean, I love studying both sides. I have to say, you know, Beauregard has really grown on me. I enjoy studying him. He's an interesting dude. This is a guy that was very hardcore Jomini textbook, and the thing that gets me, the big what if with him for me as I'm reading this, is what if he had been given the chance to go back and command? Would he have changed and evolved the way that some of the others did, like Grant? Would he have got past that? Would he have been able to see, okay, we need to change the way we're fighting? And the thing that frustrated him was the fact that Lee's Army of Northern Virginia was made by him. And he always said, I just want a chance to command my men again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was his big thing, is I want a chance to lead my men, and someone else is leading them. And that really bothered him.
Well, right. And so you look to Cold Harbor again. I'm going to make a vain, lame attempt to bring it back on topic. I know, but I'm saying, but you want to talk about people, you know, who was one of the guys who had one of the biggest reputations in the North of being a fighter, right? And that's old Winnie boy, Hancock. Yep. What did he tell Meade on June 3rd?
I'm not doing this.
He said, fuck this. Are you out of your friggin' mind? I'm not sending my troops back in again. So these people adapted and they learned. They weren't these mindless fembots who just attacked. And the wise ones are the ones who learned, right? Because I'm sure for Hancock specifically, he had Pickett's charge in his mind when he saw this, because he saw the futility of attacking and
Yeah.
enforce. Because in that west wall at Gettysburg, where those Philly guys were and where Webb guys were, that was a walk in the park compared to what Cold Harbor was. Cold Harbor was literally walking into a buzzsaw.
Yeah.
And if you went into the Battle of Cold Harbor, and that's what's amazing is the 2nd Connecticut Heavy Artillery and the 8th New York got within 10 feet of the rebel breastworks. They'd never seen battle before. Do you realize the type of guy you've got to be charging that position to get that close and not run away?
Yeah.
I mean, this is like what you expect from the Iron Brigade or the Stonewall Brigade or that type of guy. These are guys who've seen the elephant for the first time.
Yeah. These guys are all the Iron Brigade at this
They
point.
must have had a tough time walking because they had to drag the fucking brass balls across that field. That's how brave these guys had to have been. And that's what Cold Harbor was. And if you go to Cold Harbor and you check out those breastworks, there's a field in front of you can see, and there's a monument to the 2nd Connecticut, and there's a monument to the 8th New York.
Yeah.
And we focus on those in the episode because they were new and they were green. They talked about how crisp and clean their new blue uniforms were because they hadn't been in battle before versus those old faded ones that the other guys had. And they got cut to pieces. And Kellogg and Porter, their commanders, we're doing it. We're going in. They were seeing battle for the first time too. Both got killed. Kellogg got shot twice in the head while staring the Confederate line right in the face.
Yeah.
Porter gets killed because his flag bearer gets shot.
Yeah.
He grabs the flag. He's got a sword in one hand, okay, and a flag in the other. And he's leading his men, knowing it's suicide. He gets shot 6 times in the chest, and he's still holding the flag. I mean, it's amazing. And this is a guy seeing battle for the first time. That's what Cold Harbor was. That's what it was.
It's such a brutal battle. I mean, they're all like we were talking about, like 1864 is such brutal fighting, Eastern Theater, Western Theater. And there was one part that I was reading about. I didn't talk about it in the episode at all, but I think it's Wright's men. So 6th Corps. 6th Corps, by the way, after Gettysburg, holy shit. Like they go through, and these are the guys, the 6th Corps, it's funny, like, so Grant takes those guys away from Washington, and then who is it that has to come save the day when Italy is like knocking on the door? It's the 6th Corps. They got to, these guys that like, we got to go back to the defenses of well, it's not the same guys, but they're going to.
No, but the 6th, you have to. A lot of the names aren't familiar to people who just kind of. If you focus on Gettysburg, you're not going to know who James Ricketts, David Russell, and Thomas Neal are, but these are battle tested guys who are leading some of these guys. These are the same guys who are going to be the primary defenders of Petersburg, the ones who are going to be heading north to defend Washington when Jubal Early does his Monocacy thing, when he ends up in Washington, D.C. Yeah. So you're talking about a lot of traditional people. But you got Emory Upton. I mean, people know who he is. He's a brigade commander. But for the most part, you're talking about a lot of people who are kind of relative unknowns to the mainstream. Who are just as important as John Cleveland Robinson, these division guys, Abner Doubleday, David Bell Birney, the people, Strong Vincent, all these brigade and division commanders.
I think it's Strong Vincent's birthday today too, by the way.
Is it?
I think so. I thought I saw that flash up on my phone. But the thing I was going to talk about is, so Wright's guys, I hope I'm correct in saying this, but they have to go into this ravine, and then they have to come up the other side, and they get like massacred. And it reminded me so much of Pickett's Mills being in the ravine and just that terrain. And it sounded very similar to that. So there's similar things happening at the same time. And I think, for me, being a Western theater person, especially Western theater, I'm realizing I'm very much Western theater 1864. That's been an area I've always studied. Eastern theater 1864, I get a little scared because I'm like, I've not studied this as much as the Atlanta campaign or what's happening in the East or what's happening in the West. So that's why I'm like, but I do, and that's why I draw a lot of parallels, because there's similar things happening. The battles, I think, are, they're nearly as horrific, because you read the soldier stories from both sides and they're saying the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is terrible. This is the worst fighting I've ever seen. This is hell on earth. This is a nightmare.
Look at the quotes. Evander Law said it was murder. speaking of Cold Harbor,
Yeah.
you know, William C. Oates, who was commanding the 48th Alabama now because he got fucked on the 15th. They politically boned him.
Yeah.
So now he's commanding the 48th. And this is the guy from Gettysburg. And everybody knows his story about Chamberlain. But they talked about how it was. They're talking about, these are the guys who fought a Little Round Top.
Yeah.
Right. Who fought a triangular field at Gettysburg. And they're saying Cold Harbor was literally the valley of the shadow of death.
Yeah.
And there's a lot, we've talked about a lot of big battles. We've talked about Franklin, we've talked about Spotsylvania, but Cold Harbor is just on both sides, it's just pure, just murder. It just is.
It is.
And
it's
but
like,
again,
I mean,
but it's part of the big campaign. It was part of the plan. Where you're talking about Grant just throwing, and again, Grant gets called that butcher because of Mary Lincoln, but Lee lost more guys. But the reality was, how many lives did it save by ending the war? If he were to break through, if he would have broken through that line and Lee had no reserves, if he would have broken through, that's the war in the East gone. That's it. End of story. So the Petersburg thing would have ended. Wouldn't that have happened? Obviously, Appomattox campaign, Five Forks, Farm Bill, all that stuff doesn't happen, right? So again, it's like the atom bomb in Hiroshima. You killed a lot of people, but how many lives did it ultimately save in the big picture?
Yeah.
So that's why it's unfair to call Grant a butcher, because he, just like Sherman.
Well, that's what Mary Lincoln said, and she's a huge voice in history. So of course. And the media just wrote on that. Frank said, he's like, Western Theater 64 represent. And he said, to be honest, I'm a 64 Eastern and Western Theater student. So that's pretty cool.
Well, the thing about the Civil War is every year it got progressively worse.
Yeah.
Right. 61. Okay. 62, 63. Jesus. 64. Holy shit.
I do have to say though,
right?
We're right now in June of 1864. This is all going to culminate hard on November the 30th, 1864, with the Battle of Franklin, which is probably the most horrific 4 or 5 hours of the Civil War. It's up there with Cold Harbor for brutality.
Well, that's the thing about Cold Harbor. There was a Confederate officer, who I'm blanking on his name right now, who said, on June 3rd, the Union assault on Cold Harbor was over in 8 minutes. That's what he said. I mean, who knows if that's hyperbole or not? And they did get the numbers wrong a little bit, but they marched on these fortifications. They got cut down, and that was it. And you talk about on the night of the 3rd, these people were literally lying on the ground. If they put their head up, they were going to get shot at. So what do? They pulled their cups out. They dug into the ground like gophers. Some alleys on here are not, but go Gophers, right? She dug, and they climbed into the dirt to protect themselves. And the story about Porter is an amazing one too, where you have a soldier who Porter gets shot. He's carrying the flag. He's carrying his sword. He gets shot. He goes down on his knees. He gets shot 5 more times in his chest while he's holding the flag and he's holding the sword. He didn't make it, man. I don't want to spoil it, but he didn't make it. He dies right in front of his men. Now, these are green men, okay, from Niagara Falls area, Batavia, that part of New York. His men have to watch him rotting in the field now for 2 days because they can't move. They're all pinned down. They want to pull his body back to the Union line. So they get 5 volunteers, and one guy crawls out in his stomach and puts a rope around his waist.
Yeah.
And they pull his body back because they don't want to see his body anymore. And they pull it back. The guy who did that got the Medal of Honor, one of 10 medals of honor, is the Battle of Cold Harbor. Yeah. That's how personal this was. And Porter was beloved by his men. Yeah. Watching him die in front of them, carrying their flag, must have done more psychological damage than you can ever imagine, because it's like watching your father killed in front of you in a battle, because that's who he was. That's how much. He's a Harvard graduate, class of 1857.
He does look like the dad. He's got this hat on in this picture,
But he's a he's a New York State senator. He was popular in his area, but he was very beloved by his men.
Yeah.
And to be able to crawl out and to rescue his body, knowing he was already dead, shows how much they felt about him. And there's so many stories like that in the Civil War just waiting to be discovered.
Oh, yeah.
It really, really is.
Yeah. Frank said there were a few Union officers I studied that were in both the Overland campaign and Franklin.
There were a lot of them Confederates too.
Just like imagine, like, and David said Overland and Franklin, double dose of hell. Imagine you've been in Overland campaign, you're like, wow, it can't get much worse. Guess what?
Well, there's some of these friggin' guys on the Confederate side fought at Overland, went to Franklin, and they got sent to friggin' Bentonville for the end.
Like,
I mean, you want to, but that's how it is. You know, my words cannot describe how brutal Cold Harbor, Franklin, these battles really, really were. We talk a lot about some of these big boys, Gettysburg, Antietam, Chickamauga, but when you read the personal stories of some of these ones, especially Overland campaign, when you know your boss, the big man, George U.S. Grant, is using you as fodder, knowing that I've got 120,000 men, he's got 65. We're going to sacrifice half of you, but we're going to take out their men too.
Yeah,
that's what it was. That's what it was. And to be one of these, the 2nd Connecticut or the 8th New York Heavy Artillery, and be at the front, the vanguard of the attacks on June 1st and June 3rd, and to get within 10 feet of that rebel line, your first battle. I complain when the drive-through line is long at the Duncans, for Christ's sakes, and that's what these people are doing. It's amazing. It really is. It really is.
Well, that's and you have to think, like, these guys that are fighting at Overland and then at Franklin, and then not only at Franklin, you have guys from Overland, you also have guys that were at like Pickett's Mills on the Confederate side, witnessing the Union get slaughtered, as well as Kennesaw, and they realize that they're now the ones that are going to get slaughtered because of the positioning of the Union troops. And like Franklin is kind of that culmination of what a horrific year 1864 is in the Civil War. I mean, yes, Nashville is bad too, because Hood doubles down. He's like, let's go to Nashville, even though we're broken.
And they're fighting in the snow and the sleet.
Yeah. But yeah, Franklin is.
And all the bars on Broadway were closed probably. You can't go to Tootsie's. It must have been horrible. Must have been horrible.
But yeah, Franklin is just that culmination of this fighting that. And as you said, like anything after Atlanta in the Western theater is like a waste of life. Like, it's like, why is this happening now? Like,
well, you can make a point. It's so funny. You talk about where there's a million turning points. You ask anybody, what was a turning point of the Civil War? Some people will say it's Antietam. Some people say it's Gettysburg. Some people say it's Emancipation Proclamation. Some people, Chris Makowski, he says it's March 7th of 1864 after Wilderness, when Grant targeted Lee. Everyone has their own opinion and no one's wrong. But the point is, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. When the ironclads were invented, that was a big one. There's so many turning points to this war that you're not wrong.
And none of them are wrong.
But it just shows how brutal it was, though, and how the war changed. You went from the Confederacy had literally one boat when the war started. They had to reconnoiter a lot of those boats we talked about with Alex Rose that time. When we talked about the blockade runners from England, how the United States, the North, went from a Gilligan's Island style army to the strongest navy in the world. I mean, and because the ironclads that pissed down the leg of England when they realized these guys have ironclads now. So it developed a railroad network across the whole country that we still see today, of how much impact today still exists from this war, and why people see this. This is why I tell people who don't study this, you got to study this, because it's just,
it still matters.
It is the one thing that Shelby Foote said right in that Ken Burns documentary. I shouldn't say the one thing, but one of the things he said was that you cannot possibly understand today's politics and culture without a deep knowledge of the American Civil War. And he's right about that. I will take that to my grave. It's the one thing he wrote that or said that I will completely agree with. Because it's true. It's true.
Oh, I completely agree. And you have to think, like, the far-reaching effects of some of these battles. Like I always say, I believe, I don't know if it's true, it's my opinion.
Probably not.
Right. So that this is why Franklin is why Hardee and Beauregard give up Savannah so easily. Because they're like, we're done. Like, no more. No.
Well, they also had no men.
Exactly. But they're probably like, just let's give it up. you know.
I mean, who would have thought? Just think about it for a second, okay? When the war started, Charleston fires on Fort Sumter, Manassas, everything's going on. You got Second Manassas, Shiloh, the whole deal. If you had betting odds, if you went onto FanDuel in 1861 and said, friggin' Schimmelfettig's going to capture Charleston, can you imagine? Just think of the odds that you could have got. Who's going to take Charleston after the Civil War?
Give me
$100 on friggin' Schimmelfettig.
Did he show up with his pet pig?
But that's what's neat about it. But that's you never know, right?
I shouldn't call him Pigman. That's terrible. He was not.
And that's why, Mary, if you're a Cleveland Indians fan, you always have a chance. Because Schimmelfettig captured Charleston. You always have a chance.
Poor guy. He dies soon after the Civil War too.
Well, they're all dead, Mary. They didn't make it.
Well, I know that, but he doesn't like he dies.
The problem, the problem with him though is he gets it's like Sedgwick, right? Again, it's like an Animal Farm, George Orwell, 84. But it's like, the Elephant Man. But that's how it is though. Is they're both unfairly treated. I mean, Schimmelfettig did not spend the entire battle of Pig Farm. And the Sedgwick loss was a gigantic loss for Grant. But it's fun. It's fun to talk about.
I mean, I like Schimmelfettig, and the other one I like too is Krasinski.
Shiz, yeah.
Yeah, where does he go? He's Western Theater, right?
He just kind of, I don't know where the hell he goes. He just kind of vanished. Well, he's going to stay with the 11th, so he's going to carry along. But Shizanovsky, I mean, he's one. His name is worth like 1,000 points in Scrabble for one. It's impossible to say, but he was a very underrated hero of East Cemetery Hill on July 2nd at Gettysburg. Nothing against Samuel Carroll in the Second Corps, because he does a lot of good stuff too. But people don't remember Chris. Going, if you read Poola's book, he'll tell you a lot about him because he's more of a crescent moon head than you are. But that's specifically what he does. But he was there's a lot of cool stories with this. But
no, there is. And the thing that gets me, again, going back to Gettysburg, is that this whole misconception, the Howard Sucks Brigade, as I call them, comes out. And it's like, okay, first of all, he's not commanding the 11th Corps. Once Reynolds goes down, he does not command the 11th Corps on July the 1st. It passes to Schurz, who does not have a great day, but it's not a bad day. Also, Schurz is like finding out that he's suddenly the manager, and he's like, okay, what do I do now?
Well, he was. Let me read some of these comments. You see this and says, Killer Zay 101, can I join? I'm not sure what you're asking, but we're open to anything. Feel free to join. Yeah, that's good stuff. Overland or Franklin, double Joseph L. Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough thing.
Yeah.
And it's a different breed, and that's why when you walk these cemeteries and you see some of these graves and you see where they fell, you and I were down in we were down in Tennessee and Georgia not too long ago, and you see the graves at Andersonville, and you see the graves and last year we went to Spotsylvania Cemetery. And it's just a lot of these people are just buried.
I've heard Franklin is a completely different battlefield. Like, it's the most somber, sad battlefield to visit, just because you can see the bullet holes in the barn, in the house, and all that. It just hits you that how horrific of a battle Franklin was. That 4 or 5 hours.
How do I join the Howard Sucks Brigade? Well, MJ, you just need to put on a Yankees hat. That's all you got to do. You got it. You've got it. So anyway, that was an easy one, MJ. My God, fastball down the middle. My God. But that's the thing though, is the misconceptions, and you're right. It's the misconceptions season right now, right?
Yeah.
Where this guy's great. This guy sucks.
Yeah. This like Sickles. Salients are bad, and then Hessler told this story about how he was at the mine and someone told him he should be shot for, what was it? Whatever. And
well,
he's not Sickles.
Like Hessler should be shot, not Sickles should have been shot.
Hessler
should be shot. Now, you might agree that Hessler should be shot, but I'm not sure if this is the reason why. Again, it goes back to the Yankee hat. But that's the mentality. And we were talking, some of the people I've talked to you've got to like, sometimes you got to walk away. I
Yeah.
told you, God, fuck, it's
No,
been
no,
10
it was
years
like the
ago.
guy told Hessler at the mine, Hessler should be shot for insubordination.
Well, I was at
Pickles.
Oh yeah, I was at Gettysburg. Must have been 2012 or so. I'm sitting there probably drunk in Patty Rourke's or somewhere, and I had a Lincoln shirt on, kind of like this one. And some dude literally gets in my face, like literally like mad, and says that he was a tyrant and blah. I'm like, dude, I don't give a fuck what the hell you would think. But back then I got all fired. Now I'm like, okay, whatever. If you want to think this, think what you want to think. I don't care. But I mean, but people take the stuff seriously. You do.
Oh,
That's why you gotta be
yeah.
careful. That's why you gotta be careful what you say sometimes.
I
Especially
know.
you. You get my ass kicked someday. Some of the stuff that comes out of your friggin' mouth.
Oh my God. Joe Denise says AP Hill is the only character I will always clown on, especially at Gettysburg, as he was MIA. Where was AP Hill?
Hey, if you want, okay, if you want to do God's work, Joe, okay, write like a 10-page article on where AP Hill was at Gettysburg, and you will blow minds because no one knows. Now, AP Hill, I mean, he had a little case of the whatever the hell you want to call it. He got himself sick. Whatever it was, the gift that keeps on giving, as they say, right?
Burpees.
And he was sick. You want to talk about this Overland campaign now, right? He was sick. I mean, not only was he sick, the one thing we talked about in the episode we haven't really talked a lot about here is despite all the soldiers that Lee was losing, it was the generals he was losing. He had lost Longstreet in Wilderness. Obviously, Stonewall's gone. Jeb got killed on May 12th over Yellow Tavern. So he's losing. Forget the guys like Dorsey Pender, Pettigrew, all the rising stars that he had lost. AP Hill was perma sick. He was like Teak in South Park. He was always sick. And by the time you got to Cold Harbor, he was a shell of himself. He didn't fight at Spotsylvania, didn't fight at Cold Harbor. He was there, but he lost his fastball. He just was. That's what's ironic about him getting shot and killed a few weeks later. Was his heart wasn't into it anymore. Yeah. It really, really wasn't. But it was one of those. It was one of those things.
Has a great spite march though. Gentili said, I was confronted in Gettysburg once by a deranged person because I ordered a locker. Got to be careful.
Well, John, you know something? There are crazy people everywhere, John, especially in bars. You should probably watch your surroundings, because I'm going to guess it was probably your fault for ordering a Vienna lager. That was so funny, though. That was a good day. Yeah, so he ran into a psychotic at Sweeney's Tavern. It happens. It does happen.
Yeah,
it does happen. But that's the thing, though, is you talk to people and get different. We've talked famously a lot about your experience over there in Brunswick with that one guy.
That was nuts. All I wanted to know. So I asked the tour guide. I said, after the tour at Chamberlain's house, I said, do you know if Howard was here? And I couldn't even get the question out. This one guy is like, uh-oh, behind him. And I'm like, I said, are you talking about Howard? And he's like, yeah, Howard. He like was terrible, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, kind of like, I just kept focusing on the tour guide, and the tour guide's like, was getting annoyed with the guy too. And he's like, I don't know if Howard was here or not. Turns out he was at Chamberlain's house. But anyway.
I told you that, and you said I was wrong. Ha, 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 ha.
Whatever. Okay, fine. He was there.
See how she gets?
No, I believe I was wrong. Anyway, so the guy, I was looking at books down, like when we were back downstairs, and he comes up to me and he's like, starts talking to me about how Hancock swoops in and saves the day. And I mean, yes, Hancock does play an important role in the first day at Gettysburg, but he's like, he saves Howard from annihilation and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and he's like, Meade puts him in charge. And I said, you do know that he was just there kind of like assessing the situation kind of thing. And
well, I mean, Hancock was sent there because he was fresh, and there's this, the thing about those people take that as some sort of slight on Hancock, but it's not. It's just not.
It's not. And it's like, and then I said to the guy, I said, you do know that Slocum was the highest ranking officer on the field when he arrived and took over, and Hancock no longer had that role. And the guy just kind of looks at me like, has no idea who Slocum is, and he's like, I've seen the movie. And I was like,
when he said I've seen the movie, that's when I lost it. I'm like, all right, like I'm gonna go watch Star Wars now, and I'm gonna call NASA and bust balls because I saw the friggin' movie.
Yeah.
That was fun. That was a good weekend. But you got all you should have seen Mary in O.O. Howard defensive mode. We joke about it, but my God, talk about Mama Bird. Holy God.
Well, but that's the thing, is that's why I had that post like saying like the Howard Sucks Brigade comes out and it's like, they're like the 11th Corps ran, it was Howard's fault. It was like, well, Schurz is in charge.
Well, that's it. Again, you have to understand the average people. I mean, people here know it, but the average person doesn't know who the hell was in charge of 11th Corps at Gettysburg. They assume that that's how it was. I mean, Reynolds going down changed a lot of stuff, and you could look if you talk to Kent Masterson Brown, have a great debate with him, but why the battle even took place there anyway? Because by all accounts, it never should have happened.
Well, you should ask for that.
Well, that whole thing. But I mean, again, the original plan was Buford's going to go out there, reconnoiter. He ends up in Gettysburg somehow. Maybe he was going to the blue and gray. We'll never know. But then Reynolds comes out to fight. They're supposed to fight back, fall back. I mean, 11th Corps is supposed to pick up the baton. They're going to fall back to the Pipe Creek Ridge. It never happens because somehow Doubleday hears that Reynolds going to defend the street, street by street. And that was never part of the plan. So again, communication, weather, terrain. This case is communication. The Gettysburg Chamber of Commerce cannot believe how lucky they got when John Reynolds did that, because now I bought a house there, and a lot of people like MJ and me and you and all of us go visit there all the time because the battle was fought there. When by all accounts, it should have been the Battle of Harrisburg.
Yeah.
Because it probably should have been. And our friends up at the museum would agree with me, by the way.
Yeah. Well, you look at that vista and it's like, well, this is the perfect place to put some artillery, and like, I don't know, like, I think the misconceptions are very interesting and they're going to come out a lot this year. And, the one that MJ and I always talk about is the misconception of Howard and Hancock and them arguing on East Cemetery Hill. And it turns out that was something that started soon after the battle when Congress named Howard the victor. And then the Hancock crowd was like, why are you naming him the victor? This is bad. And they started putting these scathing articles about Howard in newspapers. And that's what started that rivalry. It was not at the battle itself, because the two of them respected each other. Yes, Howard was a little butthurt. Of course, I would be too. You're the highest on the field, and this guy is coming down this, and he's like, hey, I'm in charge now. Dad likes me better.
Well, everyone likes who they like, and like if you're a Gibbon guy, you're a Barlow guy, you like friggin' Baldy Smith, whoever we had met the guy who like Slocum and Fredericksburg that day. They're all out there, but again, just know the history.
Yeah.
Look, the reality is they all did their jobs in some aspect.
And they all had to do it in real time.
They all had their good moments. They all had their bad moments. But it's funny how people start to defend these people like they're sports teams sometimes, which is like, I'm telling you, if Hancock and Howard came back from the dead, first of all, you and MJ would have a freaking heart attack. I would just sit there.
Yeah.
But they would sit there and go, do you know we hate each other? We do?
They'd be like, really?
Just like Armistead and Hancock would say, apparently we were Thelma and Louise. We were one car from going over a cliff at one point. I didn't know that, really. But that's what happens is the popular myth becomes reality, that historical memory we talk about a lot. But it's fun to study, though. It's fun to study.
Charlie mentions, he said, personally, I'm fond of the Battle of Pipe Creek because he loves mead.
I mean, there's a lot of good what ifs with this stuff. There's no question. But that would have been a good position. But the problem is, I don't think Lee would have hit him there. I think Lee would have. The problem was, Lee wanted Harrisburg. He wanted to take that railroad connection to Harrisburg, because if he controlled the railroad at Harrisburg, he could ship supplies anywhere. And since he was up there for supplies, he wasn't. This was the big problem, in my opinion, is Lee wasn't going to go at him anyway. He was going to stay in Harrisburg and force Meade to come get him. So they would have just stared at each other for a couple of days. And eventually Andrew Curtin would have bitched enough to get Meade to go over there. It's probably what would have happened. But they didn't know. I mean, these guys didn't know anything at the time, what their intentions were, right?
No, they don't. They're having to make these decisions in real time. Just like Schurz, you have to, I mean, yes, he does not have a great day at Gettysburg, but he's also waking up that morning not thinking, oh, I'm going to be in charge of the entire Corps. Suddenly he's a Corps commander briefly. for the day. And it's like,
Mhm.
I have to command troops and get them into place and figure out where they are and all this other stuff. It's a tough job to do that,
Right.
And meanwhile, his boss, Howard, is finding out that Reynolds is dead and he's coming off Chancellorsville. And it's like, Reynolds is dead and you're in charge of the entire field. And he's making decisions that I don't think he's like, oh, this is going to affect like everything going forward. He's just like, what do I do? Like Mitch said, the only positive thing to say about Braxton Bragg is he owns the best unibrow of military history.
I think Bert from Sesame Street is designed after Braxton Bragg. He's got the same unibrow.
Bert is Braxton Bragg.
Probably is. Don't tell Jacob that. He'll probably buy a Bert doll.
That needs to be a meme. Jeffrey mentions that the French had the Royal Navy, the French had an ironclad Glorier in 1858, apparently.
Oh yeah, no, they did.
Yeah.
But the Union Army had a real forced evolution quick, where they had to, if there was no war, the Navy would have been a much slower coming.
Mm.
The war forced them to expedite their naval technology, because U.S. Navy was a joke going into the Civil War. It really, really was. So it definitely had it definitely was a quick little arms race for it.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely sowed the seeds for going forward with it. No doubt about it.
Oh,
whether
yeah.
they have the strongest army is to be debated, but in the Navy. But I mean, the war definitely, like the railroads, forced them to upgrade their Navy. There's no question they did.
Oh yeah. Yeah, big time. Yeah, it did. And it's like, these decisions these guys are making, just they have to Gentilly, there was no Navy, there was a Navy back then.
Gentilly's got some issues. He's been carrying some baggage, I think, apparently. I think he needs to go to the seminary and needs to clear the air, I think.
Go on another tour.
No, but we don't do a lot of Navy. We've done a couple things in the Navy here and there. We talked about Fort Fisher, we talked about Vicksburg and things like that. But I was down, speaking of Gentilly, I was out in Washington D.C. last weekend. We emptied some glasses over McClellan's retreat and over to Levitt. We walked right through David Farragut statue up by DuPont Circle, going that way. That was and so a lot of these people that you don't think that they're really important. There's a Farragut statue here in Boston.
Yeah.
There's a Blackjack Logan circle in Washington, D.C.
So the thing is, I love Blackjack Logan and I need to study more about him. But he's the one that, and we'll talk about this in our episode about Howard, about the Grand Review, where Howard marches up front with Sherman. And Howard is kind of reluctant. He's like, I don't want to be up front with the commander kind of thing. But they do that to let Blackjack Logan march with the Army of the Tennessee, because he was the one that technically should have been in charge. But I think Sherman made the right call with Howard, because Sherman needed somebody that had the not just the administrative background. Because you have to remember, Blackjack is a political general. He's also Blackjack Logan.
He's very underrated, though.
He is. He's great.
The thing about Logan is he was more popular then than he is now. He's one of those people who history has kind of forgotten, where a lot of these people have been elevated, specifically guys like Chamberlain, right? Sherman. A lot of those guys, they have a cult of personality now. Logan's a guy who I don't want to say been forgotten by history, but he's not appreciated now as he was back then, because he was very appreciated back then. He was a guy who was going to take over for Thomas. Don't forget, in Nashville.
Yeah.
When they didn't trust George Thomas, it was Blackjack and U.S. Grant were literally sitting at the airport with their boarding passes, ready to fly to Tennessee.
Yeah.
They weren't going to fly. But they were going to take over, to go to Nashville to take over for him if it failed, because all that weather they had, the snow, was delaying that attack against Hood. They thought he was dilly-dallying because he was Virginia. They didn't trust him, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. They didn't. And Grant's like, Blackjack, get the fuck to Nashville.
That's a great nickname, by the way, Blackjack Logan.
I know. And that's what, I need to learn more about him. He's a political general, just like Sickles. But I think also like Sickles, I do see Sickles as being a good general, despite what happens at the Peach Orchard. And I do agree with his decision, what he did that day. But Blackjack he's good too. And he doesn't have the recognition now. And I mean, I think even Howard struggled with the whole, like, I shouldn't be in charge of this army, but they're putting me in charge of it. It should be Blackjack. And I mean, Blackjack completely ignores Howard in his report on Ezra Church, whereas Howard praises Blackjack in his report. But he doesn't really say a bad thing about Blackjack at all. I think he understands why Blackjack is angry that he's not the one in charge. But could you imagine Blackjack Logan in charge of an army? He's too much of he's good, but he's a loose cannon.
No, he's someone who needs to be managed. I mean, a lot of
he's like Hood. He's like Hood.
Hood is a good comparable on the Confederate side, because he's somebody who probably can't sit in the big chair, but somebody who is really good as a second subordinate.
He just needs that manager. And Howard, Howard becomes, we see it, I think it's at Columbia. Howard is the adult in the room. Sherman is like, you're in charge of this city now. And it's a good thing he did that. And Howard leaves that city. He leaves the citizens with cows and with guns.
Yeah, people don't realize that when they left Columbia, he left the citizens food, but also weapons to defend themselves from people. That's a fascinating thing when you think about it.
And Howard wrote his wife and said, we need to learn to be friends with them again. And we have to have good relationships, because they recognize, and Howard did too, that the war was coming to an end. So they couldn't leave Columbia in ruins. They had to leave them with something.
Well, he's just trying to make up for that woman he pissed off in Columbia from telling her off that time.
Oh yeah, that was great. That whole thing where she comes in and she's like, one of your men, and they're like, was it Blackjack? Was it like Joseph? Like, was it Jefferson C. Davis? No, it was
Jeff C. Davis would have been the guy, but he
bastard.
No, but this
you committed murder. You get to command an army.
Well, I mean, it is what it is, Bull.
Who do you give Bull Nelson?
Bull Nelson. They said he had it coming in that hotel lobby, but who the hell knows?
But it's he gets promoted.
It's a different world now. I mean, now, but back then you've got Sickles killing Key in public square, and you've got Bull Nelson being gunned down in a hotel lobby, and they go, okay, fine. But it's just, it was a different world back then. Obviously, Earl Van Dorn we talked about with Dr. Peters getting gunned down, hooking up with the wife, and I mean, it's the
she was hooking up with everybody. It turned out.
She was. She had more hands up her dress than a Muppet at that point. But it was funny to just read the individual histories of some of these people. But that's what's fun about studying it, is some of these cool stories like that,
Yeah. Well, what's her face that EVD was like having some fun with? She comes out at Franklin again too. They're all having breakfast at her place, and apparently she was like hanging some of the guys there too.
I don't know, Mary. I don't know. I think maybe you got your mind in the gutter. I think too many Danielle Steele novels. I know, I'm just teasing. We should get wind down here pretty soon. It's almost that time.
It is.
We've been doing good with the staying at the 11:30 thing. We still a little bit longer, but
we usually go to about 1:45. Frank said, "I'm surprised President Davis didn't offer Sir Jefferson D. Davis a commission after the Bull Nelson incident."
Talk about an unfortunate name. It reminds me, there was a Baltimore Ravens. They had a radio guy named Jerry Sandusky, and that was another unfortunate name. Because unfortunately history has gone different directions. But you named Jefferson, between him and States' Rights Gist. I mean, it's just
States' Rights.
But it is pretty cool to talk about that. But so what's coming up for us? We got to talk about Gettysburg real quick, because we got a lot of. I'm sure we'll do another live before we head down there in a couple of weeks. But we got a lot of fun stuff planned.
We do.
We mentioned at the beginning of this. If you can, definitely come to Spangler Farm on July 1st at 4:30 p.m.
Yeah.
We're doing that partnership with Gettysburg Foundation with Mark Blanchard to tour the farm. It's a private tour. It's free. Yeah. It's like I said, it's not open to the public traditionally, but they're letting us come in.
We have the invite out on Facebook, so
if you want to come, just show up. Just you don't have to register. There's nothing like that. Just show up. And it doesn't cost any money. And then we're going to be doing a froth up afterwards at Foursquare Brewery, right down there on Washington Street. And we're going to be hanging out there for a while. And then there's a lot of cool stuff. Google the stuff that's going on in town that weekend. If you are going to Gettysburg for the 160th, there's a lot of cool people going to be down there, a lot of cool things to see.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's good weather. That's the one thing, right?
I think it will be. David said EVD met a bad and Bang Barn has consequences.
Does.
He went to the Bang Barn one too many times.
He certainly did. Looking for love in all the wrong places. Will Nelson wrote a song about it, I think.
He was,
sure.
didn't you talk about EVD in an episode about a bit about his life, about how he was like kind of a party boy?
Oh, that's who he was. I mean, some of these guys, they wore the uniform, they look good in the uniform, they took full advantage of it. That's pretty cool. But I hope we'll be doing a live before we go. But since it's like 2 weeks away right now, today's Saturday, right?
Yep.
When is the first? Is that the Thursday or is that the Friday or Saturday?
It's 2 weeks from today. We're going to be doing our tour at Spengler.
So it is on a Saturday. So,
yeah.
So 2 weeks from today, we'll be doing that. Again, just show up, take advantage of all the stuff going on. I'm sure Addressing Gettysburg is going to be doing some stuff. Battle of Gettysburg podcast, Eric and Jim will be doing stuff. Go online, find out what they're doing, but definitely take advantage of it. It's going to be a great weekend. It's going to be a lot of people in town, so definitely enjoy it.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we have to talk about Howard, our next episode.
Yeah, our next episode is going to be about Howard, about his after so we're not going to be talking about him at Gettysburg. We're kind of going to pick it up where Congress comes in and says you're one of the victors, and just how that creates this myth between him and Hancock and the rivalry between them, because that's where it was media driven. It was not either of them. It was something that was driven by the media. And then we're going to talk about his, Western theater stuff, probably a bit about Freedmen's Bureau when he went to Oregon, because he lived there for 7 years. And then basically take it up to when he passed away. And one of the last things he did before he passed away was he gave his last public address.
Right.
He gave a lecture, and it was in London, Ontario, Canada, which is about an hour.
We were just by there. We were looking.
We were really near there. We were maybe 10 minutes away from there.
How the hell did we not go?
We just didn't that day.
Because somebody's low beer light was on. We had to go to Darling Brothers Brewery.
That place is cool though. Anyway, so London, Ontario is where Howard gives his last speech, and he went back to Vermont, and he passed away a week later. And his last public appearance was in London, Ontario, Canada. So we'll probably take it right to that point where he passes away.
Yep. Be a sad day for you, Mary. We'll have to turn the lights down real low. And I can only imagine. You'd probably be all teary. You're probably going to dress in black and
I'm just glad to be recording an episode about him, because he's so misunderstood post Gettysburg. Like, people think he's
an interesting study. He's one of those guys where there's a knee-jerk reaction one way or the other. I would say the reality is most people don't know who Oliver Otis Howard is in the mainstream. They've heard of Howard University probably, but they don't know Howard from Howard Stern realistically. So it's fun to study people like that, to understand the impact they had, because people like him made a real big impact, and he did survive the war, and he did the Freedmen's Bureau, and he did the whole Nez Perce. He did a lot of things in his life that he did do. But his stories.
Lincoln Memorial University. He's also he's an abolitionist at a time when it's not good to be an abolitionist. Odds are he's an abolitionist on the March to the Sea. So, and he doesn't really talk much about what happens at Ebenezer Creek in his memoirs, but I'm sure it shook him to the core what happened.
No, Howard has that uniquely New England ability to insult somebody without insulting them.
Oh yeah.
Which if you're from here and you read it, you know what he's talking about. He's very subtle and he's very smart about that. But his family is not far from right over the corner here. His
family is originally from Plymouth. Yeah, and
Plymouth and Bridgewater.
They're originally from Plymouth. They moved to Bridgewater, and then his parents are from Massachusetts. From his dad's from the Bridgewater area. So he's kind of the first Mainer in their family.
Yep, little Lotus.
Yep.
A lot of fun with that. So, all right. So let's jump off. It's going to be a crappy day today. I think we'll be sitting around the house all day today, man. There's much going on.
We'll go out and find some beers somewhere.
I don't think we'll see any baseball tonight, but that's okay. No. We'll have to deal with that. So, all right. So off we go. So we got that. The Howard episode we'll do, and we get around to doing that. I'm going to have to. I don't know what I'm going to do for that one. That's going to be bad.
I'm looking forward to it, because I get the one thing I get questions about a lot is, what did he do after Gettysburg? He did so much. he commands an army, Army of Tennessee after McPherson dies. And that was kind of a struggle for him too, because Sherman comes to him and says, I want you to command this army. And Hooker's still around at this point out west. And Howard says that should really go to Hooker. And Sherman's like, no, it shouldn't.
No, it doesn't. Anyway, all right. So off we go. So have a great rest of the weekend, everybody. It's a long weekend, Juneteenth. We got some, hopefully weather permitting, some history stuff from the two of us on Monday. We're going to go to the city and do some shenanigans.
Might be
some
doing
fun
some.
with that.
So if we do go into Boston, if the weather's okay, we're going to be going into Boston on Monday. We'll be doing some history stuff. That will be from our Facebook. Because it's much easier for do us a Facebook Live if we're.
So we'll do a Facebook Live from the city. We're going to go into the city on Monday for that. So for the fathers out there, happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day, everybody.
For the people who don't know their fathers, just avoid that knock on the door. Hopefully everything's okay on Sunday. If you're it's an old joke, but somewhere.
Mitch said, much like coaches, some generals are better corps commanders than army heads.
Oh, we've been saying that for years.
Yeah, that's exactly John Bell Hood.
Absolutely. It's a lot of people like, and there's no shame, and that's no shame on them. Everyone's got their ceiling. There are some ball players who peak at AAA. That's what they got, better than most people got. But to say Hood is not a great Army commander of the Army of Tennessee is not an insult. It just means that he was better commanding. He was a better subordinate. And that's the case.
Division. He's like Blackjack was much better taking orders from somebody. Blackjack in charge at Columbia would have been Party Town because he's Blackjack.
Yeah, he would have been. He'd been a good time.
He's a great general, but he's also a party animal.
Oh, nothing wrong with that. I'm sure he's had his Pedialyte in the morning, like some people I know. What they're good people. They're sleeping their rags in their heads and sleep till noon, but that's okay.
I was up before you today. I was up at like 10 to 6.
That's it. It's you were. All right. So anyway, off we go, guys. Have a great rest of the weekend. We'll talk soon. Stay healthy, be good to each other, have a good time, and have a good, safe, long weekend. Remember the meaning of Monday, Juneteenth, because it's a Civil War type of holiday. So take a moment to think about it and enjoy what we have today, and realize that there are better days ahead. Just got to keep fighting. It's a never-ending battle. So